Hello, and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection, the podcast that works to connect the world of behavior analysis and the world of education. We focus on topics important to behavior analysts who work in the public schools and those who support them. Join us and spend time gaining insights and ideas as our host talks with fellow behavior analysts as well as other experts in the field. Hello, listeners. Welcome back again to the Behavior Education Connection. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I'm excited to have with me today Erin McCormick. Hi, Erin.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining me today. You've been on with us before, but just for those listeners who may not have heard your previous episode, do you mind introducing yourself again?
My name's Erin McCormick, and I am the behavior specialist for Fluvanna County Public Schools. I've been in special education for probably longer than I could count right now. I think it's been about 19 years, and I've always been in public schools, so it's kind of where my heart is as far as the behavior analysis piece goes.
Great. And you've been a BCBA there for quite a while, right?
Yeah, I think it's been about 5 years-ish.
Give or take.
Yeah, can't remember exactly.
So today we're going to talk about group contingencies. And I think as behavior analysts, we learn some basic things about group contingencies with the good behavior game or mystery motivator, some of those. But I think today what we're going to focus on mainly is what does that look like in public school and how do you make that effectively occur in a classroom with multiple kids? So if just to orient everybody today, why don't you give us an example of one of these that you've tried in your division?
Yeah, we've had a few teachers kind of start working with these lately, and it's been really great because I think sometimes we in public schools know, things can be complicated and complex and difficult and challenging, and sometimes we try to make complicated and complex, solutions to those problems. And what I've really kind of found this year is just like going back to basics and back to just reinforcement and what are we doing to help kids understand and be motivated to follow the expectations. And so we have some teachers that are doing some things similar to the good behavior game or like the you versus me, where the
Yep.
teacher earns points or the students earn points. And just like gamifying things and making things, into games and giving kids different roles, or we have some that do escape rooms and they do whole quests that students are a part of. And those students are just so engaged, and it's so encouraging to see those things because, as we know, when they're highly engaged, we don't see as many difficult behaviors. So that's been really awesome to see people kind of taking more of those things into the classroom this year and being really creative with that.
Can you give us an example of one of the virtual escape rooms? Or sorry, can you give us an example of one of the escape rooms?
Can't remember what exactly the theme of the escape room was, but I know one of the English classes at the middle school here did one, and they had kids kind of working in their individual groups, and their goal was to make it to, the next level and to solve the problems related to their language arts lesson. And they needed some support in some cases, figuring out the answers and getting through those. But again, even if it didn't go perfectly as planned, the kids were so engaged and they were learning, and it made them want to come to class and excited for when's the next one. And the teacher's like, oh gosh, that's a lot for me to plan. But it also doesn't have to be that complicated. Like that's a pretty complicated task to take on, I think. But there's really, really simple things that we can do too.
So, what have been some of the things that you've needed to kind of work with some of the teachers around in order to make these group contingencies more successful?
I think the biggest thing is that, there are some pitfalls. There are some things that can kind of go wrong if you're not planning for them. One thing is just making sure that you have motivators that kids are interested in. Sometimes as adults, we want to prescribe what they're going to earn and say, here's what you can get. But if that's not motivating for them or interesting for them, then that's when I get oh, we tried that, but it didn't work.
Right.
But if we had a reinforcer that was actually a reinforcer, then we know that it would work. So, first of all, just getting them involved in the process of what they want to earn and how they want that to look. And then also just making sure that you are taking everyone's needs into account. So, with some contingencies, everyone might have the same expectation, but we know there's going to be certain students that are going to need extra support or they're going to need modifications, or maybe someone needs a special role because they get really stressed out when something is gamified and that makes them really nervous. And so maybe they're going to be the scorekeeper so that they can still participate but don't have to feel, stressed out by the situation. So there's a lot of problem solving that goes into it sometimes. And then I also just think that paying attention to how, what are they earning, but also how quickly are they getting it? Are they having to wait until the end of the month? That's a little bit long for middle schoolers to wait. Sometimes they can do the end of the week. One of the teachers at the middle school does points for the you versus me, and then whichever class has the most points gets like a special incentive on Friday. And they're all very motivated by that. So making sure that it's soon enough and that they really, really want it. And then just taking into account that there might be some kids that either try to sabotage it or they're too cool for it. And you kind of have to figure those things out. And sometimes that means that, they have their own group, or you do have a private conversation with them and ask them what role they would like to play if they're not interested in being part of the game in the way that everybody else is. So sometimes there is that problem solving. So it's not always an immediate quick fix. We have to kind of figure out what's going to work for the teacher and what's going to work for the students. And that's just part of the process. But once you find something that works, it can be really powerful and applied to really anything. If you have a simple like you versus me game and your students that day happen to be struggling with talking too much during independent work, then hey guys, we're going to play the game for the next 30 minutes while you're doing independent work. And they know the game, they know how it works, they know what they're going to earn. And right then and there, you can kind of stop those behaviors that might be interfering with learning.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important point is that the games take a little time to teach, and it's important that you take that time so that when you are ready to play the game, whatever that might look like, everyone in the class is also ready, and you're not taking more time out of instruction to again teach that game and what it looks like. But I mean, research shows that these games can be really, really effective in managing interfering behavior, and students tend to report that they really enjoy them. Are
They
you finding
do. It's
similar
they
things?
get the games. Yeah, they get sometimes it's like they don't understand the rules and you teach them a game and they're like, "Oh, I get this." So when it's made into a game and you have to, meet these certain things to get access to something and it's a contest, that they seem to suddenly understand the rules much better. It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think there's some motivating factors there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We know that reinforcement is coming, so it's acting as a good SD for us.
Yes, for sure.
So, what are some of the kinds of reinforcers that students are earning?
I think in middle and high school, regardless of if it's through a group contingency or not, the biggest thing is probably snacks. We have a lot of kids that love some snacks, so that is always high on the list. There's also just like little tangible items that kids like. A lot of them, stickers are big right now, so a lot of kids like stickers, and you can get bulk packs of those. But then there's also free things. There's having lunch with a friend that's not in your class, or having lunch with a preferred adult, or extra recess time, or earning time outside. Your class gets to go for a walk for 10 minutes in high school. So sometimes those things are even more valuable, those social reinforcers that don't really cost us anything. And with some of the group contingencies, you can have a student who's on that, that independent, the dependent piece where they're kind of the one earning it. And maybe nobody knows it, but at the end of the period, the teacher can say, hey, guess what? Somebody earned us a 10-minute walk outside to end our block today. And so there's lots of different things that they're interested in, but I think those free ones are kind of the best, and giving them that. And sometimes it's a little bit of extra computer time or just social time at the end of the block where they can choose what they want to do. Our middle schoolers and high schoolers are also really into just regular games, just playing Uno. Uno is huge. Like we have kids that play Uno every single day. So just getting some time to play a game with someone, which also is a great skill building opportunity for a lot of our students.
Well, and one of the things I love about group contingencies is they work from preschool through post-secondary, right? I mean, we still have these things that work on us as adults. But I love that you talk about these middle and high school examples because I think a lot of times I hear from a lot of people like, well, that might work for elementary students, or oh, it's always geared towards elementary students. And so I love that you all have some really positive, successful examples in the secondary.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and some of them are just electronic options that are out there. I think Kahoot is one. There's different games and things, but just that gamifying and having teams of kids who are competing against each other to win something is huge at those levels, especially because engagement can be more challenging as the content gets more difficult and some of the social things get to interfere a little bit at that age. And so giving them that opportunity to be engaged and focus on that game that they're playing is really powerful and helps really increase their engagement and their learning.
Yeah. So what are some, you mentioned a couple of them, but what are some things that you want to ensure that teachers or school-based behavior analysts who are working with teachers think about um, if this doesn't go well or to ensure it does go well, I guess is probably the better way to ask the question.
Yeah, I think just thinking about different factors ahead of time, like we said, thinking about and getting kids involved in on the decision making with what are we going to earn? What's the reinforcer going to be? What type of contingency are you going to do? Is it going to be everyone has the same expectation, but they're earning their own reward when they get their points or when they get their bucks or whatever it is? Is it going to be more one of those games where it's interdependent and they have to, work together to beat the teacher or work together to earn points towards something? Or are you going to do kind of that hero factor where maybe as you pick a name out of a hat and no one knows who it is, and it's the mystery student of the day that has to meet a certain expectation in order. So planning ahead and knowing what type of contingency you're leaning towards and what's going to work best for your class, getting the kids involved in it for sure. And using, think about what you're using it for. What are your goals? What do you need to change in your classroom? Is it just basic classroom expectations and staying in your seat and paying attention and things like that? And what are you targeting and being really specific about what that looks like with students? While also taking into consideration that students with special needs might need accommodations or they might need a special role or they might need to be explicitly taught some of those behaviors. So just thinking about your students ahead of time and what they're going to earn and what type of contingency. And then also having a process where, hey, if this doesn't go well the first day, it might not. That's okay. But what's the next step going to be? And sometimes it is having a conversation with the class, like, hey, we tried this yesterday. Didn't go so great. So what can we do differently today? Or what would work better for you? Here's a couple options we can try. Because I think when you get them involved in the conversation and they have some ownership in it, then it can be more powerful for them too, to then try that and try to meet those expectations the next time.
Yeah, and I think one of the things for me, all of that for sure. But I think one of the things for me is, the intent of these group contingencies is, in layman's terms, to kind of create that positive peer pressure, right? It's basically to use social contingencies to reinforce our behavior. But we have to do that in a really positive way. And so designing the games that's what's being reinforced. So it doesn't become negative. Like, we don't want a student to be like, well, you ruined the whole game for us. We don't want a situation where, students are embarrassed because of their own performance or something like that. And so all of those things can be planned for and designed around, but we definitely need to think of them ahead of time to ensure this is as successful as it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a big risk when it comes to some of these things. And it's something that I think that staff have to be really cognizant of is their goal is to point out the positives, not the negatives, and to, say who's doing the right thing and who is earning points, and you can address the other things later. But some of it's helpful for, if you do like the mystery person, it's anonymous, it's not,
Right.
we're not going to announce to the class, oh, it was this student today and they didn't earn it, too bad, right? Like it's the purpose of it being anonymous is that they get the praise if they win it, and if not, we just try again the next day. But it is important to think about those things, especially if you're doing teams in the classroom and making sure, everyone understands that it's not the end all and a just, terrible if they don't win that day, that they'll have other opportunities. And knowing your students too, you might have some students, like I said before, that are really sensitive and might struggle with this type of thing and might not want to play games. And sometimes, even when I do it with adults, I'll use it in some of my trainings. And I have some adults that are like, oh gosh, I hate games. It stresses me out. So, like, okay, you could be the scorekeeper, or
Right.
what do you want your role to be, So, thinking about those things ahead of time is really important, but also being able to go back and reflect and look at, what do we not think about that we need to maybe adjust as we move forward.
Yeah, and I will add, I've done this in several classrooms, and it always actually turns out really well. The students generally get very involved in it, they really like it. And I think it can help build a really positive culture in a classroom.
Yeah, definitely. And as long as, like you said, we're focusing on those positive things, and you'll have kids asking, "Can we play the game today? Are we going to play?"
Yes.
And so having that, and some of them are bigger systems. Some of them, you do have quests, or you have, the kids can level up if they have a really great day, and then maybe there's other incentives that are available to them if they, get a certain amount of points by the end of the week. And teachers are really, really creative now with all the resources that we have, and coming up with some of these like really fancy systems, but it also doesn't have to be that fancy. It can just be simple. And that can change kind of the whole culture of the classroom when everyone is focusing on those positive things.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. And I think it's a great conversation. And I definitely encourage our listeners to think about how you can incorporate group contingencies into the work that you're doing. Erin, I think this actually kind of brings us to a good wrapping up place, but is there anything that you want to add?
I think just, knowing that people might want to try some of these things and you might have teachers that want to explore these things. I think a great place to start with them is just looking at those like basic classroom management pieces. Sometimes we skip over the basics, especially as kids get older, and we expect them to know the expectations and know what they're working for. But you can use a group contingency just to reinforce participation, or,
Right.
staying in your seat during independent work, or whatever it is that's really, really, really simple. And it can be really effective just for those really small things. So it doesn't have to be some grand, scheme. It can just be, okay, what's something quick that I can apply to make sure my students know the expectations in the classroom, and they know the routines, and they know, all the things that are going to make things go smoothly. So I think just knowing you can be as crazy creative as you want to, or keep it as simple as you want to, and you'll still have something that's really effective.
Yeah, I like that. And I echo the voice. I think starting small is a really good opportunity just to say, you know what, I'm going to dip my toe into this and see how it goes, and then let it kind of build from there. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, definitely. And just remembering that, the basics are still there, and we don't always have to have a huge, complicated intervention. Sometimes what I've realized a lot this year is that motivation piece is missing for a lot of kids. And even if they have other complex needs, if they don't feel motivated to come to school and to be here and to engage, then that's the biggest struggle in getting over some of those behaviors. So we have a lot of kids this year that just have some motivation systems in place, and it's helped immensely. So it's good to remember to go back to the basics sometimes. So we don't have to use the complicated interventions. Sometimes it's just back to the motivation. We have a lot of kids this year that, while they do have complex needs and they have a lot of services and things happening, a big piece that was missing was just motivation. Just giving them that little extra carrot to make them want to show up and want to come to school. And it's amazing when you kind of go back to just that simple piece, how much of an impact you can have without having to go the route of a really complex, behavior intervention plan. We just have some kids who we just put them on motivation systems this year. And like I said, even though that's not all they need, it's a huge step in the right direction as far as motivating them to go to class and be in class and try to do the work. And that's really all we're asking for when we are talking about students in public school settings is show up and try, and we'll be there to help you. And so that's kind of allowing them to be available for learning this year, is going back to that basic motivation reinforcement, and how can we make them want to be here.
Yeah, I really like that. And you're right. Sometimes just starting with, I need you in the classroom. And if you're not here, it's really hard to get instruction done. So,
Yeah, definitely.
all right. Well, Erin, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Always a good conversation.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and always happy to chat.
All right. And to our listeners, we will see you on our next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Behavior Education Connection. Join us next time for another great conversation about behavior analysis in the schools. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Sending out a special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for supporting our work. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.